Welcome. Tonight, we drift gently back in time, not to the thundering front lines or the clamor of world-shaping battles, but to the quiet corridors of ordinary life in Germany in the year 1938. A strange year, a breath before the storm, a moment suspended between history's loud chapters. You may think of uniforms and parades, of speeches echoing across plazas, but tonight, we won't focus on the spectacle. We'll look instead at the stillness beneath it. The way the floorboards creaked in a modest Berlin apartment, the way the sky turned grey and late. Autumn over a town to quiet, the way fear settled in not with a shout, but with a whisper. In this episode, we will explore a peculiar moment in time unfolding slowly, steadily. You'll begin with the routines of daily life in 1938 Germany. Then, you'll hear the story of a man who claimed to remember a past life as a general. We'll walk through the strange halls of Nazi mysticism and the archaeological obsessions buried under the regime. And finally, we'll visit the mountain retreats of the elite where power reclined in tailored uniforms and silver service. All of this told softly, steadily, and without judgment. Imagine yourself waking in a modest third-floor apartment in Berlin. The light outside is faint, filtered through heavy curtains drawn tight not for privacy, but for caution. The air in the room is cool, slightly damp, and carries the smell of coal soot and boiled potatoes. The radio crackles quietly in the corner. You listen because everyone listens. But you don't respond. Not out loud. Not with opinion. It's 1938, and things are quiet, uncomfortably so. Your apartment, once filled with the sounds of neighbors laughing or children shouting in the stairwell, is now wrapped in a strange hush. People greet one another politely. But briefly, eyes flick to windows, conversations and at thresholds. The furniture is old, some of it inherited. The wallpaper peels slightly at the corners. But you dare not complain. The party is restoring order, after all, and order demands silence. Your stove is temperamental. Lighting it requires careful coaxing and ration fuel. The flicker of the flame is a small victory, and the bubbling of water familiar, if meager. Comfort, breakfast, if you can call it that, consists of stale bread, a thin scrape of butter, and perhaps some ersatz coffee made from roasted acorns or chicory root. Real beans are too expensive or unavailable. Children wear uniforms now, even the youngest. Their mornings begin with marches and songs. They recite odes you do not teach them. And when you walk them to school, you notice the posters. Bright colors, bold words, faces looking outward. There's no graffiti anymore. Not since the last boy who tried. You pass the corner shop. Herr Lang used to own it. Now, a sign hangs in the dusty window. Closed indefinitely. You don't ask. Everyone knows not to ask. The rhythm of your days is quiet survival. Shopping is an exercise in patience. Russian books are now routine. You wait in line, nodding silently to others. Some faces you recognize. Others are new, unfamiliar. Unspeaking, the butcher has less meat than he used to. The grocer smiles less, and the baker no longer jokes as he did at home. You listen, not just to the news, but for sounds in the hallway. Footsteps that hesitate, and knock that lasts too long. The Gestapo doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It whispers, it watches. Sometimes, it doesn't need to knock at all. You write letters. But carefully. Words are weighed. Even paper seems to hold consequences. Neighbors have vanished. Over paragraphs, it's safer to write about the weather, the vegetables, the progress of a child's. Schooling. Inside your home, there is a radio, Everyone has one now, provided by the state. It delivers messages, music, declarations. You can turn it down, but never off. On Sundays, you might visit a friend. But the visits are brief. Eyes drift toward closed doors. Toward the ticking clock, conversations revolve around trivialities, baking, repairs, cough remedies, safer topics, neutral ground. At night, the city dims early. The streets are quiet, but never still. Somewhere, always, a presence can be felt, a patrol, a conversation that ends abruptly when footsteps approach. The sky above Berlin remains the same, cloudy, streaked with smoke from chimneys and factories, but the feeling beneath it is different now. Tighter, heavier. Children dream of flying machines and uniforms. Parents dream of peace, but dare not speak it aloud. And you simply try to remain unseen, ordinary, in step. This is what daily life felt like, a slow erosion of normalcy, a quiet pressure against your identity, a constant adjustment to new lines, new rules, new silences, every meal, every errand. Every bedtime story whispered behind closed curtains shaped by a presence that was everywhere, yet nowhere in particular. Even now, decades later, historians find it difficult to describe this era in absolute terms for some. Life remained livable, for others unbearable, but for many, it was neither. It was simply endured. And so, the days continued, the boots clicked on payment, the radios whispered, the clocks ticked, and the quiet stretched on. Let us now drift into stillness again, away from the creaking floors of Otto Lenz's quiet home, and into deeper shadows, into the chill of high mountain air, the quiet echo of boots on stone corridors, and the pages of peculiar books with yellowed edges and strange symbols. This is not the history taught in schools, nor loudly proclaimed on plaques or memorials. It's a quieter history, a stranger one. A history of belief systems buried beneath the uniforms and flags in the 1930s. As the Nazi regime solidified its grip on power, it also turned inward searching not just for control, but for meaning, for something older than politics, something mythic. This effort coalesced in the form of the Ennennaby Research Institute, founded in 1935 under the SS. Its name meant ancestral heritage, and its mission, at least publicly, was to explore the cultural and historical roots of the Germanic people. But behind its polished facades and scholarly titles, the Ennennaby conducted expeditions, excavations, and experiments that strayed far beyond conventional academia. Imagine a caravan of black trucks winding through the Austrian Alps, inside, not soldiers, but archaeologists, linguists, and occult enthusiasts. They study rune stones and Bronze Age burial mounds by lantern light. They whisper theories about lost Aryan civilizations beneath the ice. They pore over Nordic songs not for literature, but for encoded truths. There were expeditions to Tibet, where SS researchers sought evidence of a common Indo-Aryan ancestry. They measured skulls, photographed faces, and sketched the peaks quietly, convinced that ancient wisdom might lie hidden among Buddhist scrolls or sacred caverns. Other missions took them to France, Scandinavia, and remote corners of Germany itself. In one case, a team spent weeks documenting petroglyphs near Lake Titusy, convinced they depicted ancestral migrations from the mythical island of Thule in libraries and dimly lit salons. Certain high-ranking officials surrounded themselves with astrology charts, medieval grimoires, and esoteric diagrams attempting to weave a new narrative of German destiny. And at the center of this curious endeavor was not science or religion exactly, but symbolism. Runes were carved into dagger hilts, ceremonial rituals, some invented, others reimagined from pagan traditions, were enacted under moonlight. The swastika itself, lifted from ancient Indo-European imagery, became more than a political emblem. It was a sign of cosmic alignment. Yet, strangely, this mysticism did not often find its way into public propaganda. These beliefs, these quiet rituals and studies, were largely concealed from the average citizen. They were not for crowds. They were for insiders, for those who believed that history was not merely a record of events, but a puzzle of bloodlines, cycles, divine recurrence. One archival memo, never widely published, noted that certain SS officers practiced seasonal solitude at solstice, retreating to forested caverns, where they lit fires and read from hand-bound volumes of reconstructed runic lore. What were they? Seeking. Perhaps validation, perhaps mythic coherence, perhaps in a fractured and chaotic world. They sought the comfort of patterns, however invented, and so the Anenabe persisted. For nearly a decade, it funded digs, translated texts, and sketched relics, always in search of a vanished greatness they believed could be restored. But none of it ever yielded what they truly sought. No runestone confirmed superiority, no relic. Whispered secrets, the soul was quiet, the skulls. Silent, and yet the work went on, patiently, quietly, like monks in reverse, seeking not salvation, but supremacy. After the war, many of the Institute's records were seized, scattered, or hidden. The Anenabe was officially disbanded. Its members tried, imprisoned, or lost to time, but in dusty museum basements. Forgotten crates remain, labeled in faded German, filled with plastic casts of ancient carvings, moldy notebooks, and delicate glass slides of unremarkable stones, evidence of a strange historical detour. One where myth and power were embraced in science, then faded into the stillness from which they came. And now, let the quiet deepen. Let the weight of ritual and runes dissolve into the crisp mountain air. We rise, slowly, into the Bavarian Alps. The trees thin, the roads curve, and the world below grows distant. You are no longer in the crowded apartments of Berlin, nor in the dim halls of the Anenabe. You're climbing toward isolation, toward retreat. This is the Berghof, or perhaps the Kelstein house known to the English-speaking world as the Eagle's Nest, here, at the very edge of the sky. The Nazi elite gathered not for parades or proclamations, but for rest, for silence, for mountain. Views and formal teas served on heated silver trays. It was a strange world, carefully manicured. Picture long hallways of polished wood, heavy red curtains, and flower arrangements placed with exact precision. Picture a fireplace crackling softly beneath a massive window overlooking the mountains. Where clouds drift like ghosts between the peaks, the Berghof was Adolf Hitler's personal retreat, his chosen residence for much of the war. But he was rarely alone. Members of his inner circle, including Albert Speer, Eva Braun, and Heinrich Himmler, often stayed nearby in satellite chalets or adjoining rooms. Life here followed its own rhythm. Breakfasts were formal, meals were vegetarian, films were screened at night in a private cinema. Music, usually Wagner or Beethoven, floated through the halls. Evenings might include long walks on stone terraces or discussions of architecture and future cities yet unbuilt. And everywhere there were rules, not official laws, but social codes, subtle, powerful, and unspoken. You didn't ask personal questions. You didn't speak of failure. You complimented the view, the architecture, the weather. Loyalty was not merely expected, it was performed in posture, in speech, in the absence of dissent. The staff uniform, discreet and ever watchful, kept the place running like a hotel without guests. Dishes were cleared before they were empty. Ashtrays replaced the moment a cigarette was finished. And yet, beneath the comfort, there was stillness, not peace, but tension held in check. Visitors often reported feeling watched, not by any one person, but by the system itself. Even in repose, they were representatives of something vast and consuming. Imagine sipping warm tea on a balcony, while below, the world turns darker by the day. Imagine knowing, in some corner of your mind, that this comfort is borrowed, that outside this cocoon, the cities are tightening, the trains are running, and history is gathering like a storm. Eva Braun, in home videos, twirls for the camera in summer dresses. Children of SS officers play in the grass. A dog chases a stick. All is normal. All is still. But the quiet here is not natural. It is constructed, maintained, and it hums with something unsaid. After the war, the Eagle's Nest was spared destruction by the Allies, the Berghof, however, was bombed and later demolished by locals who did not wish for it to become a shrine today. Tourists still visit the mountaintop. Riding glass elevators through the rock, they drink coffee in the former dining room, which has been converted into a restaurant. The views remain unchanged, but the quiet has shifted. Once, it was the quiet of controlled power. Now, it is the quiet of memory. The long hallways echo only with footsteps and camera shutters. The rooms no longer hold their conversations. The fires have all gone cold, and the tea long since poured. And now, as we slowly return from the heights of the Alps, from the flickering lamps of the Berghof, from the low murmurs of dinner conversations that echoed into the walls of history, we settle once again, or into stillness. You've drifted through a year 1938 that so often feels like a prelude, a breath before the plunge. But as you've heard, life within it was already heavy with meaning, already dense with fear, ritual, and strange comfort. You walked the worn streets of Berlin, where voices were quiet and curtains drawn. You stood beside a man who may or may not have remembered a war not his own. You followed scholars into ancient tombs, searching for lost glories in the soul. And finally, you gazed down from manicured terraces, where power once smiled over a land it would soon fracture beyond recognition. 1938 was not merely the eve of something greater. It was itself a world, complex, contradictory, weighted with symbols, drifting between myth and memory. And though that world has passed, faded like the photographs left in abandoned suitcases, its textures linger in books taught in ruins, in mountains and names and places we still visit, in stories like this one. So, if your eyes are still open, feel free to let them close. The street lights of Berlin no longer glow with gaslight. The radios no longer crackle with party slogans. The train cars are still. The mountain retreats are empty, windows shuttered against the wind. And all around you now is quiet. Let it stay with you. Let the past rest, and let yourself drift gently into sleep. Good night.